So now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our Washington State Solicitor General, Noah Purcell. You know, TIPS is an organization that celebrates very talented young people, so I think it's especially appropriate that we welcome a still relatively young person. And it's a young man who began his career of accomplishment when he was the age of most of our interns. As Noah was a Franklin grad, as many of you know, where his success as state champion in mock trial presaged all of the advocacy work that he's done to date and for which he's so well known. By the way, Noah was recently honored by Franklin High School as an outstanding alum, and his co-honoree was, in fact, a TIPS alum, and we're very proud of that. Noah graduated from UW and then went to Harvard Law School, and of course, having picked up a master's in economics in Ireland between the two. That's what we usually do between law. I didn't personally do it, but a number of people do, and evidently Noah did. He worked and clerked for the finest, both locally for Perkins Coie and nationally as a clerk for Supreme Court Justice David Souter. That is a big deal, I promise you. Noah was thrust into the national spotlight recently as the advocate who successfully argued that the travel ban should be enjoined because it caused economic harm to Washington State's economic and business interests. From a lawyer's point of view, this is a very unique and clever argument, but it was interesting to me that this view was shared by virtually every major company in the Northwest and many tech companies, especially nationally. They all wrote amicus briefs in support of Noah's position. And as you know, there's a lot that has gone on, but that was successful. He's an... You know, I said a couple months ago, I said to Noah's boss, Attorney General Ferguson, that the groups of lawyers in particular, the easiest way to get a standing ovation in Seattle at that time was simply say, Attorney General. And it was a very popular position in the Northwest, not by everybody, but by most. And so, so how has Noah accomplished all this? I couldn't help but note the other day when we got together in the afternoon in downtown Seattle. It was almost 3 o'clock, and Noah ordered another double shot. So the secret, evidently, of his success is not only talent and brains and hard work, but caffeine. I want to make clear that was caffeine. It wasn't whiskey. But Noah and his wife Jasmine have a vested interest in TIPS because they just became parents for the third time. Please welcome Noah Purcell.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, and thank you all for being here today to support this great cause. I feel like I've been talked up so much that I can only possibly let you down, and I want to apologize in advance for that. I should also say that I don't always drink that much coffee. Work is busy, but my wife and I did just have our third child 8 weeks ago, so I'm a little bit sleep deprived. And if I say anything incoherent today, it's the baby's fault. I also want to say there was a picture up there of a cape. I don't wear that. That was not my idea of a cape. Well, this is another picture, but anyway, I don't go around wearing a cape all the time. Just to be clear, a friend made that for me. So I want to talk today about why it's so important to get young people involved in public service, and I just want to use a few stories from my own experience to make the point. So I grew up on Beacon Hill in Seattle, and throughout most of my childhood, my parents worked at nonprofits, and that was back when you worked at a nonprofit, you could afford a house on Beacon Hill in Seattle. And, you know, we weren't rich, but we had a roof over our head, and we had plenty of food, and I had 2 loving parents who had both gone to college who could help me with school. And I saw all around me that that meant I had a lot of advantages that a lot of my classmates did not have. And I saw that routinely. So there was a picture up there of my mock trial team from Franklin High School, and that was an incredible team of students, and we had a great coach, and we won the state championship. And by the way, there in the gold shirt with her eyes closed, that's my wife, Jasmine. She always has her eyes closed in pictures even to this day. But anyway, we met in high school, and she has other wonderful qualities, but she always has her eyes closed in pictures. But on a serious note, on that team, I mean, they were incredibly smart, talented, hardworking people. But there was a young woman on that team who was regularly sleeping in her car with her family. There were immigrants from a number of countries, some of them undocumented, who later had to leave the country. A lot of those kids didn't even go on to college, much less law school. And I mean, I can tell you from having seen a lot of lawyering now, a lot of them would have made a lot better lawyers than you see every day in practice. And so I saw from an early age that people do not always get the chances that they deserve, and that we have a long ways to go before we really have a society where there is an equal opportunity for everyone. And I think that's one reason why it's so important for teens to do public service, because those are lessons that you can't really learn from a textbook. You can't, I mean, your parents can tell you that, and you can sort of read about it, but you really have to see the struggles that other people go through that you may not have yourself experienced to understand what other people have had to overcome. And that not only makes people better, I think, citizens of the world and just better informed people, but it also just makes them better, happier people, right? I think if we only go through life thinking that our own problems are the biggest thing in the world, and we don't realize the many advantages that we have, you're just not as thankful. You're just not as happy of a person. And another lesson that public service teaches young people, I think, in particular, is that they can make a difference. There's a lot of young people today who are sort of disengaged from our democracy, they just feel like they can't have an impact, that no one listens to them. And I think if you actually go out and do public service, if you do volunteering, if you volunteer on whether it's for a nonprofit or a campaign or anything like that, you see that you actually can have an impact. I think you quickly learn that one person really can make a difference. And I was lucky, again, to get to see that early in life. Joe mentioned, my wife and I, we went to University of Washington for undergrad, and we were really passionate while we were there about trying to keep tuition affordable, in part because of our experience seeing so many young people from our high school not able to go on to college. And so we did a lot of activism. We formed a nonprofit called Affordable Tuition Now that led lobbying trips to Olympia, and we did letter writing campaigns, and we did all sorts of stuff. And we had a lot of success convincing the legislature to enhance financial aid and to keep tuition affordable. But then our senior year at UW, our second senior year, we both did the 5-year plan, which I convinced my parents was because we had such a strong love of learning. But anyway, the administration imposed this new course fee, they called it, and they were allowed to set course fees, but it was a fee that everyone had to pay regardless of what class you were taking. And so we thought, well, this is just an illegal tuition increase, and we kept objecting and complaining and trying to get someone to stand up and prevent it, and no one ever did, and they implemented it. And then we did something sort of insane. We hired a lawyer and we sued the university, a case called Jasmine Weaver, that's my wife, versus UW Board of Regents, and we won, and they had to refund $1.5 million to students. And yeah. And I don't tell that story because I want all the young people to go sue their university. That's not at all. But it was just an incredible lesson in sometimes, especially when you're in high school or college, you don't necessarily think that you can affect big things. You think, your role is sort of small. And I really think that young people, through volunteering, through involvement, learn that they can accomplish big things. And I think through TIPS, from what I've heard today, I think we heard a lot of the same things, and from Joe, young people learn that. They learn that they can make a meaningful difference. They often continue, in the overwhelming majority of cases, the young people continue volunteering after their internship is over, and they just see what a difference they can make in the world. And then the last lesson I want to talk about, and this may apply more for the students in the room than for the adults, but everyone, I think it's a lesson for everyone, is that sometimes out here in Seattle we can feel like we're kind of off on the corner of the country. Sometimes, you think that all the big things are happening in Washington, D.C. or New York. And especially growing up here, sometimes I thought, to myself anyway, I don't know about others, but I thought that, there's some group of super smart people out there in the world who really understand how things work and who run things, and they're in charge and they have things under control. And the older I've gotten, the more I've learned that that is not true. Yeah, that is just not true. And I first began to realize that actually when I was in law school at Harvard, and I had a lot of great classmates, but they really weren't that different from my classmates in high school and college in terms of how hard they worked or how smart they were. The biggest difference was, the overwhelming majority had just had incredible opportunities and access to opportunities throughout their lives. So a lot of them were going on to high-paying jobs or interesting government positions, not because they were universally brilliant, but because they knew people who could help them find those positions. And of course, they worked hard as well, but it was not as though they were just completely different people. And powerful, famous people came to campus all the time and spoke, and there would be small group events and elected officials or writers or so on. And I saw that they were just people. Some of them were very smart, some of them were not so smart, some of them were very nice, some of them were not so nice. And I realized that the people making the big decisions in the world were really just like the people, I had grown up with, people I knew here at home. They just, they had been given different opportunities and had taken advantage of those. And if I hadn't been sure of that before, the travel ban case, I think drove that lesson home in a way that nothing else could. When the president issued that order on Friday the 27th, it started to have immediately some very terrible impacts here in Washington on a lot of people. Families that were separated and students and faculty at the universities who were stranded overseas and couldn't come back, employees at some of our big companies who all of a sudden couldn't travel for work or to visit their families. And but the experts on TV and the legal blogs and such were saying, the president can do this. It's okay. He has broad authority and no one can challenge it. And we didn't think that was right. We didn't think that was legally right. We also didn't think it was just right generally. And so that Saturday, when I talked to the Attorney General at some length about the possibility of us bringing this case, we knew. It's sort of hard to remember in retrospect. It seemed like it was going to be a real uphill battle. There were all these people saying, no one can challenge this. And he made the brave decision that we would go ahead, and a team of attorneys from across our office came in and started working on it. And these were, ordinary people who had never done anything remotely like this before, I think it's fair to say, right? None of us had ever sued the president before about an executive order. We had to figure out, for example, how do you serve the president with things like that. Basically we worked all weekend, we worked nonstop, and we filed our case on Monday. The hearing was on Friday, and Judge Robart, granted our request for a temporary restraining order, and then, yes, and then things kept happening that if you had told me in advance that we would need to do them, I would have said that's impossible. Like the next day, the government filed their appeal on Saturday night around 9:30, and the Ninth Circuit told us that our response was due the next day, Super Bowl Sunday at midnight. So we had 26 hours to write this response, and I would have thought that was impossible, but we had a team of people, and they all pitched in and dropped everything, and we got it done, and we won again. And I just want to read a card that I got shortly after that. Bringing cards up was apparently I didn't know, that was a good idea. Hopefully it works for me too. But so this is a letter from a woman who taught at my elementary school. So she wrote, "Dear Noah, just wanted to thank you and express my appreciation for your accomplishment. You probably don't remember me, but I was an English language learner at Kimball. I was an English language learner teacher at Kimball Elementary School when you attended. I'm writing to you from the perspective of someone whose family was greatly affected by another executive order, EO 9066. 75 years ago, my family was uprooted and sent to the horse stalls in Puyallup Fairgrounds, then to Minidoka, Idaho, where I was born in this internment camp. You can see why I'm greatly concerned with what is happening in our country now and why I felt such pride when I saw you in the news. Please keep up the fight, and please give my regards to your mother." So we got a lot of letters about the case. That was probably the single most powerful letter that I received. But it was just an incredible reminder of what people are able to do if you believe in yourself, if you've learned some skills about how to be involved in public service, in public life. And it doesn't mean, I want to be clear, it doesn't mean that you have to be working in the Attorney General's office or working at a nonprofit. It can be, we had attorneys at private law firms who helped us with the case, who did amicus briefs, who gave us help with technical points of the arguments that we had not worked on before. We had support from all these big companies, from the general counsel's offices. I know from my own experience in private practice, there's incredible things you can do in pro bono work as a lawyer. There's incredible things you can do serving on boards and volunteering. The point is that there are big things that you can accomplish if you recognize the advantages that you've been given and you just make the commitment to try to use those to help others. And I think that TIPS helps instill that idea in people, and that's an incredibly valuable idea for people to have, for people to learn at a young age, and for people to believe. So that's all I have to say today, but thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your time, and thank you.